So for those of you who I haven't met already, my name is Karen Flynn. I'm the Deputy Associate Administrator for Management within the Science Mission Directorate. And so the purpose of today's town hall is to go through the Science Career Path tool that was recently developed. This career path tool was developed principally by a significantly sized team from uh, NASA centers and our lab partners, APL and JPL, as well as representatives from Beeline. Those representatives are Lori Simmons and Nancy Rackley, and they will do the bulk of today's presentation. Um, with that, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So this just outlines the agenda that we'll be following today. I'll do a very quick discussion about the science workforce study and the recommendations, and then from there we'll jump straight into the career path tool, and that will be taken over by Lori Simmons for the bulk of the conversation. Okay. So one of the things that has recently occurred, if you look into the science.nasa.gov website, is that we have made a number of changes so that both the science workforce study, the original study, and overviews on all of the recommendations that have flowed from that study and the implementation status for those recommendations are much more easily found on our SMD website. So it's under the About Us tab. You'll find a new tab now on workforce initiatives. The link has been provided here. And along that tab is where you're going to find both access to this tool as well as the information on the recommendations. And Andrew, before I go any further, I think there was a comment about whether or not the closed caption is working or available. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I can. So if you look at the bottom left of your screen, there should be a little kind of a comment looking icon that has CC on the center of it. Those are your closed captions, and you can click that to turn it on. You can also click the down caret to change the language if you do not speak English. But if you do not see that, there is a little option on the bottom right of your screen called Panel Options. It's the 3 dots button. You go ahead and click that, and you can turn on captions that way as well. All right. Thank you, Karen.
Okay. All right. With that, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide. This next slide shows you a full table of all of the recommendations that came from the science workforce study. Again, the unique thing about this workforce study is that it did not hone in just on the civil service cadre that supports NASA science. We really focused on NASA science everywhere that it's executed. And so in terms of career path, leadership development, and the role of the project scientists, all of our recommendations have been focusing on not only how those work gets done within the civil service ranks, but also at our lab partners at JPL and APL. And as I said, so principally the recommendations fell into 3 areas. Today, we're really going to focus all of the conversation on the career paths, but a number of other things have occurred in the leadership development area, project scientist arena, and again, you can go to the easily accessible update on science.nasa.gov to keep in track on what we were doing. I would say we're probably on the order of about 75% complete with most of the recommendations. And so we're really making some great progress. Okay, with that, let's go ahead to the next slide, which is, I think, the turnover point to Lori and Company.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everyone. My name is Lori Simmons, and I am one of the co-leads on the project for creating the Career Path tool. And my colleague, Nancy Rackley, is also online. She was the other co-lead. And we both work for a company called Beeline Express. And we both were involved in the full workforce study. And then after that, as you saw, there were 12 recommendations that came out of the study, and 2 of them pertain to the career paths. And Nancy and I co-led that effort. So today, what we want to do is give you a little bit of background on the career path itself, the career path tool, but most importantly, we're going to show you a demonstration of the tool and how to navigate it. So the two recommendations, and this is just the two that that Karen showed on that overall table, the two recommendations coming out around the career paths. The first one was to simply adopt the nomenclature around the 5 career tracks. So during the study, it became clear that there were 5 distinct career tracks that a scientist could take throughout their career. And so I'll show you that in, I think, the next slide. But so this first recommendation is just to implement those 5 career tracks as kind of standard language within the science workforce community. And that's been done, and that's kind of an ongoing thing. The second effort was developing a web-based career path tool, and that was much more involved, but we use those 5 career tracks as the foundation of that tool, and that's what we're going to show you today. Tell you a little bit about the team. We had actually 2 teams. We had a NASA team and a Beeline Express team. The NASA team was primarily scientists, and as you see here, locations were all across NASA, so most of the centers were represented, as well as JPL and APL. The NASA team was responsible for the content, and so what I mean by that is the NASA team created or determined the career paths themselves, which positions would be on the tool, which positions would be featured on the tool, and then what paths they belong to. And then for each position, and at the moment we have 78 individual positions on that tool, it was the scientists themselves that defined each of those positions. And you'll see there's a great deal of information about each position that you'll see on this tool. The other team is a team full of software developers. And this is where I say where the magic happens. So where the content was provided over to the Beeline team, it was the Beeline team that built the software tools, made it work, and put the data in the right place. And so that was the magic of it all. And the interesting thing is, although Nancy and I led both of these teams, it was me really leading the NASA team and Nancy leading the software team. These 2 teams never met each other. They never interacted. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing about how it ended up working out. So these are the 5 career tracks that came out of the workforce study. You see it's nice and colorful here, and that's purposeful. When you see the career path tool, it is color-coded throughout. So anytime we're talking about one of these 5 tracks, it will have the corresponding color. So the first track is supervision, and this is management type roles, supervisory roles at various organizational levels. The next career track is mission. So this is roles that would support any type of mission, a low suborbital type mission, a space mission, and varying size and complexity of missions. The bulk of our scientists seem to be in the research, analysis, and application track. And again, this is any type, there's a broad definition of doing research work or analyzing the data or applying the data in any way. The next track is technology development, and these are the roles that would be enabling future missions through discovering new technologies. And then the last one here is science program management. These are the leadership roles that contribute to the strategic planning of the NASA science work. A lot of these positions are supervisory, and many of them happen to be at NASA headquarters. Not exclusively, but a lot of them are at NASA headquarters. So some of the features of the career path tool, as I mentioned, it has 5 distinct career tracks. There's summary descriptions on a number of science roles. So at the moment, there are 78 science roles on here. And the reason why I say at the moment, it could change if we realize that there is a role that we didn't cover and we should be adding to this. So it is flexible going forward. But at the moment, there's 78 individual positions across those 5 career tracks. There is something called a career path map, and this is an interactive display of, I think there's probably about 10 or so key leadership roles, and we did an interactive display of some common paths of getting to those leadership roles. As Karen mentioned, we wanted to make sure this was applicable not just to NASA, but also to our lab partners. So it is not specific to one particular organization, but rather broadly focused, so it could apply whether you're at a NASA center or a lab partner, or a large center or a small center. And then it is public facing. So we wanted to make sure that it could reach a broad science community. We wanted to also make sure that it could reach those who not necessarily are in the science NASA workforce at the moment, but might be aspiring to. So grad students, your neighbors, anybody can see it. It is a public facing website. Some of the benefits that we hope come out of this tool certainly gives you a better understanding of the NASA science workforce. It will increase your awareness of how to navigate your own career. Some of the features you'll see is information not just about the roles and responsibilities of a particular position, but what are some ideal skills and competencies that someone should have, and how you can, what are some suggested developments to how you can either work to attain that position or possibly and grow from that position. Certainly talks about different career opportunities and development strategies. It would help, I believe it could help you prepare more for leadership roles. From a management perspective, supervisors can use this tool when working with career planning or development discussions with their employees. Since it is public facing, as I mentioned, it can engage those individuals that might be looking to come to the NASA workforce, the science workforce. We can use it as a recruitment tool, and we're hoping that with this transparency of navigating one's career, that can help raise morale and also increase retention. Okay, I am going to attempt to go live here and give you a demo. Go home, and because I'm working it looks like I am on full screen. Okay, I'm working off of a laptop, so I want to make sure that I'm looking at a full screen here. And because I'm at a full screen, I'm going to get this off. Because I'm on a full screen, you can't see the URL. So the most important thing is how to get here. Back on the slide deck, it does say the URL, and we'll give you a copy of this as well. But the URL is sciencecareers.apps.nasa.gov. And so that's the most important thing, is how to get there. And thank you, Andrew, for putting that up. Okay, so this is our homepage. We also call this our landing page. And so I want to talk a little bit about I guess what's across the top before we get into the meat of the tool. The meat of the tool being this here that looks like the USS Enterprise. So across the top, this banner, if you will, not that banner, this one here is going to be on any screen that you're on throughout the tool. So you'll always be able to reach these things across the top. So these are just additional information in addition to what's featured in the career track itself. So the first thing, it says NASA Science Orgs. So what you see here are the listing of the NASA centers, as well as our 2 lab partners at APL and JPL, the Science Mission Director at headquarters, and also the Office of the Chief Scientist. If you click on any of those, it's going to give you the description of that particular organization. It will give you the URL for the science program that happens at that particular organization, as well as a link to the overall organization. And I'm going to go back here. Also show you if I click on a center. So if I click on Langley as an example, this is going to give you the link to the science organization at Langley. This is a link to the overall URL, the overall site for Langley as a center. This is a description of Langley as what the science work is. And then it also gives you an estimate of the number of scientists at that particular organization. So that way, if you're looking to see, is it a large science program or medium or so, there's a range of the number of scientists that reside at that particular location. The next tab here is career tracks. And so these are the 5 career tracks that are also down here. So this is just another way of getting to those career tracks. The next here is career levels. You see here on the graphic, we have 3 main career levels: early, mid, and senior. Up here, this goes to the same definitions of those levels, as well as we added on here executive levels. And then with the federal civil servants, there's something called an ST and an SL. So if you click on any of these, it will give you the description of what that means. But down here, in terms of early, mid, and senior, if you hover over or click on any of these 3 buttons, it's going to give you a description of what a early level scientist or mid-level scientist or senior level scientist should be doing at that phase of their career. Going back up here across the top, career path maps. This is what I mentioned, where we picked about it's probably about 10 senior leadership roles within the science workforce. If you click on any of these, and this will be the last thing that I'll demonstrate, it's going to give you an interactive map of some common ways of getting to those leadership roles. And then this last button, I'm not going to click on it, but if I did, it's going to exit the screen. It's going to go to the NASA, the science.nasa.gov site. So it takes you to the Science Mission Directorate webpage. Across the top here, is the first one here is a search function. That's a really nice feature in here. And that I mentioned there's 78 positions on the website on this tool. And you may not necessarily know all 78 positions or what they might be called. And so this allows you to search for a particular position, and it will search on the overall title, the main title of the position, or if you guessed wrong, we have alternate titles listed as well. And so you can use this to search for any position that you might be looking for. The home button simply gets you back to this site here. This roadmap here, as I said, everything is color-coded, so this reminds you of what that legend is and allows you to click to those tracks if you want to from there. And then the last thing here is this question mark. And if you click on this question mark, basically it gives you navigational instructions for the overall site, and also it gives you navigational instructions for each individual type of page. So let me jump into the meat of this here. And so, as I mentioned, this one of the chuckles, I guess, coming out of developing this, the scientist team especially ended up liking the looks of this because it looked like the USS Enterprise for those Star Trek fans out there. So these are the 5 career tracks that we landed on. It was intentionally drawn this way to represent what, a visual of the career tracks for a scientist. So in particular, the 3 in the center here, the mission, the research analysis and application, and technology development, those are what we believe to be the core science work or the hands-on science work. The bulk of our scientists will be working in one of these 3 areas, probably throughout their career. And so we drew it in parallel, very close to each other and somewhat intertwined. So we did that to show that many scientists either can work in more than one track at any given time or flow in between these 2 tracks over time. So it was drawn this way intentionally. These other 2 tracks are drawn a little bit outside of the what I would call the core science work. The top one here being supervision. And so we wanted to draw it in a way that it wasn't, once you went into supervision, you never came back. So we showed it that you go into supervision, you can come back down to the core science work and go back out if you want. One of the things that you see as I'm hovering over this, I believe that you can see it, when you hover over supervision or any of these titles, any of these tracks, it's giving you a definition of what that track is and what type of roles might be in that track. And so this the bottom track is a science program management, and that track, again, it's like supervision, and many of these positions are supervisory, but again, we wanted to show that you could leave some of this core science work, come out to this track, and then go back in. So I am going to go ahead and jump into this. So again, you can click on any of these tracks, but I'm going to start with the research analysis and application track. The reason why I start there is the bulk of our scientists probably start their career with NASA in this particular track. It has the most roles, you'll see. The 3 tracks in the center, the mission, the research, and the technology development are set up the same way, meaning that there's a cluster of early level roles, a cluster of mid-level roles, and a cluster of senior level roles. These color swirls basically represent an opportunity to transition to another track. And so these icons here represent, and the color coded as well, represent those tracks and allow you to, you can click on this and jump over to that other track. Clicking up here or hovering up here will give you a definition of the research track or any other label that's up there. Okay, so all of these white boxes are position boxes. They are all clickable. I'm going to go ahead and click on this first one, this principal investigator at the research track. And one of the things that you'll see is sometimes you'll see a name of a track in parentheses, and other times you do not. The reason for that is there are sometimes some positions, in this case a principal investigator, where you can be a PI or a principal investigator in the research track or in the mission track. So anytime a title can be used in more than one track, you're going to see the parentheses. The other time you might see a parentheses if it's unique to a center. So there's a few positions that are unique to JPL, and you'll see in parentheses that it says JPL. So we open up, so any of those white boxes open up to what we call here the a summary, position summary. It will give you the title across the top, and I mentioned there's alternative titles. Anything that might be an alternative title, in some cases, like one center might call it X and another center might call it Y. We tried to capture them across the top here. So it gives you a description of the roles and responsibilities. Where does the position reside? And like I said at the beginning, where you have up here where you can click on a description of any NASA organization. Same here, if you want to click on the organizations from here, knowing that this position resides, or you can click on that and see a little bit more about that organization. Some ideal skills and competencies for that particular position, and then also suggested development activities. Across the side here to the right side, you'll see, again, everything is color-coded and stays consistently that way. And so here, well, let's go back. That was an accident. Here you see a list of positions that are positions that might lead one to this particular role. So in order to get to the principal investigator at the mid-level, what might you have done before then? And then likewise down here is what are some positions, if you are a principal investigator in the research track, where can you grow from there? And so these are some possible growth opportunities if you're in this particular position. So one of the things I want to show you is this, I'll go back, and so a research scientist. So this happens to be the early level research scientist. Again, same format in terms of describing the roles and responsibilities, skills and competencies, as well as suggested development and where the position resides. Here, because this is a very common position and it's an entry level, so to speak, position, there's a number of different titles that some places might call it. So again, if you use that search function, it's going to find these alternate titles as well. But what I want to point out here to the right side is there are a few positions here that are not color coded. They are gray. And the reason for that is, so what might you have done before being a research scientist at the early level of one's science career? You may have been a university scientist. You may have been a Pathways intern or part of the NPP program or contractor. So we don't have these positions in our system. It's not defined here, but we had it here. It's grayed out. It's not clickable, but for informational purposes only. And so there's some senior level positions, again, that growing from that position might take you to a position external to the science workforce, and so it's grayed out as well. So just to know that there's some informational tabs here, but not clickable, not defined within our tool. So when I go back, one of the things that I believe that you can't see, because I can't see it as I'm looking here, but I'm on a full screen, which takes off the URL. But one of the things to note is every single position on this tool has a unique URL. So what that means is you can copy and paste the definition of that particular position and share it with someone if you wanted to. So every single one has a unique URL. That's kind of a neat, handy feature. So let me go back to the track here, and let me just show you quickly that the mission track is set up similarly, where you have the early roles, the mid-level roles, and senior level roles. Again, each of these boxes are clickable. You can hover over the label here. I'll give you a definition of mission. And then likewise, the technology development track, fewer positions on this particular track, but again, we have it set up of career stages. So what I want to show you is the supervisory track and the science program track are set up differently. So they're not set up by early, mid, and senior level, but rather by organizational structure. So when you're in the supervisory track here, you have a choice of going to NASA centers, JPL, APL, or NASA headquarters. So I want to show you a couple of these right here to show you how it's set up. So this one is NASA centers. One of the things that you can't see, and here we go, let's scroll up here. One of the things that it's important for NASA centers is that every NASA center varies in size of their science program. And because of that, the career track might be, supervisory career track in particular, might look different. It might be labeled a little bit different, or the options may not be there. So what we did is we went ahead and mapped out what would be the center with the most amount of positions, and recognized that some of the smaller ones may not have that. So at the lowest organizational structure is a branch or a lab. And so there are some supervisory roles at that level. The next level up, if the science program has a next level, would be a division. And so again, these are some of the positions at a division level. And then the highest level, and again, not every NASA center will have a science directorate, but if they do, these would be the positions that would sit at that would reside at a directorate level. And again, you can click on any of these. It'll give you a description of that particular position, where it resides. So in this case, it only resides at NASA centers. Some of the skills and competencies. And this particular one I showed you is a senior executive position. And so there are certain competencies that are required for a senior exec. So we showed those general competencies as well as the technical qualifications, and then some suggested developments for that particular position. And then again, it shows you roles where you may have come from and growth roles, growth opportunities from this position. So I'm going to go back and then let's go home, and I will go ahead and pick, let's go with JPL to show JPL here. So again, a little bit different organizational, the structure is the same, but the titles are a little bit different. So rather than a branch or a lab, their first organizational level is a group. Going up one higher is a section level, and then the next level is a division level. And again, all of these positions are clickable. And I can jump over to any track from here, but I'm going to go ahead and use this legend. And from this legend, I'll show you one more, and that's NASA headquarters. This is set up a little bit differently. There's not really a hierarchical structure as much as just showing you the various supervisory roles. It is somewhat hierarchical in that the associate administrator would be higher up than these other positions to the left. And then also the Office of Chief Scientist has some supervisory roles as well. And then the last track to show you is a science program management track. Again, this one is set up by organizational structure as well, instead of the early, mid, and senior level. So you have science program management positions at a NASA center or a lab partner, as well as at headquarters in the Office of the Chief Scientist, and then a lot of positions in this track in the Science Mission Directorate. So one of the things that looks different here than the others is we still have this orange tab across the top. And I mentioned early on that a lot of the positions in the science program management track are supervisory positions. So we didn't want to take away and say, okay, you only can find these particular roles if you look at supervisory and over here as well. And the reason for that is, even though these are supervisory positions, the most important part of what they do is science program management. So these positions across the top, 5 over here at SMD, and very sensitive. And then these 2 over here at the Office of Chief Scientist, they're shown twice as supervisory roles. Down below here are the non-supervisory roles. And then over here at the NASA Center, it's not indicative whether it's a supervisory position or not, but some of the types of roles at a NASA center or lab partner that would be considered science program management. And then the last thing I want to do, let's go back home. And the last thing is to show you these career path maps. And so all of these are considered to be senior level roles that one might aspire to in their career. I'm going to start with the PI, the principal investigator, and the research track, since we've looked at that early on. And so this is sort of like a spaghetti map, but once you kind of digest it, it's pretty neat. So first of all, the caveat to share here is that this is a common role. These are common paths so the target position is over here, the principal investigator, research track. These are common paths, but not the only path. So many scientists will go a variety of different ways of getting to one of these roles. So any of these positions, you can hover over it and you see the immediate positions that are feeding into it. And then you can kind of work yourself backwards. And again, this is very sensitive. It's my laptop, that's all. And so you can hover over, if you wanted to walk backwards or walk forwards, you can kind of see if I'm starting off here as a research scientist, where might I go if I want to follow onto this track. And all these boxes are clickable. So again, if I want to click on an instrument manager, I can see what an instrument manager does and all the other information that we saw before. If we want to see other maps here, let's just click on Division Director at Headquarters. So again, this is your target position, and you can hover over any of these positions and kind of see what path you might have taken, or might you take to go ahead and get to these roles. And I can do one more for you. Just let's do principal investigator in a mission. So this is a case where you can be a PI in more than one career track. And so again, your target position is always to your right, and you can hover over and see what are some of the common paths to get you over to that target position. So with that, and I'm going to just check in with my colleague Nancy. Is there anything that I have forgotten in the demo?
I don't think so. Look, it's perfect.
Okay, well, you're perfect. We won't say perfect. Okay, so that is that's my demo. I certainly hope that one that you enjoyed seeing the demo, but most importantly that you can get some good information from this tool. And I will take questions, and I'm going to ask Andrew, should I stay on the tool or should I go? I guess I'll just stay here and see what kind of questions we might
Yeah,
have.
I'd go ahead and stay on the tool because you could probably answer some of those questions by just showing where they lie in the tool if they are there.
Okay, great, thank
So
you.
number one right now is there a way to know what the degree requirements for each position are? For example, MS versus PhD for research or data scientists.
It's a good question. There is nothing specific in this track that says, I'm just taking a look at some of these early levels. There might be a couple positions where it says advanced degree, but it's not specific. We didn't want to, there was an assumption that most of these positions would be PhD positions, but there were a few that would be maybe grad level, master's level, but not many. And so we didn't speak to the educational requirements. And I don't know if that's something that we would revisit or not, but if there is anything about a degree, it will just say an advanced degree in one of these fields, but it won't say what level.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question is, where can we find salary ranges for each role?
So that gets a little trickier. There's nothing in here about salary. So this is very broad and it includes both civil servant roles at NASA centers as well as JPL and APL. Everything at NASA is a civil servant role, and they're going to be, their pay is going to be determined by the Office of Personnel Management, so it's OPM. You can see the grade levels there and what the associated pay would be, and it is set up by area. So if you are looking to be a scientist in Langley, it's going to be one pay scale versus being a scientist at Ames in California. And so when you look, if you look at the I guess it's USA Jobs is the link, and it will show you the pay scale for civil servants. Now, I am unfamiliar with, because I'm a former federal employee, I'm much more knowledgeable of civil servant pay. JPL and APL, they have their own pay setting. I do not know where you can get information about that, but I would certainly start with their websites. I think each of those websites would probably list vacancy announcements, and usually on vacancy announcements, they would list a pay, a salary. I'll also ask Karen if she wanted to add anything to that. I believe those are the right answers, but do you have any other information on JPL or APL salaries?
No, I don't.
Okay, I didn't think so. Okay, thanks, Karen.
Alrighty, perfect. So you mentioned USA Jobs. There is a question/comment saying it would be very useful to have USA Job links to open positions for each center off of the tool, and or if not, positions that are currently available that could be stated on the tool as well.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. I know Goddard Space Flight Center has several career path tools for engineering type roles, and we tried to go down that path of linking it, and I had some difficulties. And Nancy, do you want to talk to that? Some of the challenges we found in trying to do that?
Sure. I mean, we could link to like the USA Jobs, but it's very hard to link into their search engine that would only bring up scientist jobs for a specific position. I mean, it's definitely something we can look into because I know with USA Jobs, they have, I mean, the website has been upgraded, so it might be easier to interface with that and actually bring, if you're in a data scientist position and have a link that says, check, you know, opportunities at USA Jobs for this position, we can maybe try to do a search and bring you actually to a page that would have a list of data scientists.
Yeah, so I think that's something, so I appreciate that feedback, and I've taken notes of that. It might be something as an enhancement that we can just at least add a link to where one might search on USA Jobs, but then also add a link to where one might search at APL or JPL for some of their openings as well.
This might be a good time to just let folks know that the expectation is that this tool will continue to undergo some improvement and changes over time. So the NASA official owning organization for this tool is going to be the SMD admin branch. The new branch head there is Tomas Reina. So you'll see his name listed down as the NASA official here. And so that is the intake point for recommendations around changes that might be needed. I'll note that there was already one recommendation to review the Ames center description to ensure that there's biology. So we'll certainly take that as an action as well. But the tool, will try to evolve as careers and paths and organizations continue to evolve. So, thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Karen. Excuse me. So the next question is there a plan to add guidance on how contractors can become civil servants, or how postdocs can become civil servants?
My silence means I'm thinking. There aren't any current plans to do that. And again, as not saying that's not a good idea. Certainly this shows you paths that once you are there, or what are some of the entry level or early level roles that one might look towards. And also keep in mind, NASA's science workforce hires at many different levels. They don't just hire at the early level. They also hire a lot of positions at the mid and senior levels. But at this moment, there is not a plan to add that guidance. It's not a bad idea. And again, as Karen mentioned, the admin branch of SMD would be the one to decide what the content enhancements would be. So certainly I will take that as something back to SMD for discussion as to whether we would put something in there that would give that particular information. And that might also link into, the USA jobs is the path into the federal government. And then APL and JPL might have different paths. So it might feed into, if we add some type of link on here to refer you to those sites for application purposes. So that might all kind of link together.
Mhm.
But thank you for that feedback. Karen, did you want to add anything to that?
Nope.
Okay.
Alrighty, well, there are several other questions related to contractors versus civil servants. So first off, is this tool only for civil servant positions, or does this include contractor positions as well?
So I'll take a stab at this, and if Karen wants to enhance my reply, I'm welcome. I welcome that. So this is a broad look at the NASA science workforce. Many of these positions are federal positions, and certainly more senior level positions are likely to be either civil servant roles or full-time roles at a lab partner. So again, JPL and APL is our lab partner. But there may be some applicability in the contractor world. So a lot of these roles, like your research scientists, a data scientist, some of the roles that I would probably say more at the early and mid-level might be, I hate to say the word generic, but more universally applicable as a contractor. So you might see yourself in one of these 78 roles that are on this website at the moment. You may see yourself there, and you may see some growth to certain roles, but some of them might be unique to civil servants and others may not. So it is not designed to show a path within a contractor workforce, but you can perhaps see some similarities. And I will say that I guess APL and JPL are not civil servant roles, but they're not quite contractors either. So they're sort of an in-between type thing. So again, it's not designed to be specific to just civil servants, but it's also not designed to be a particular contractor, because there's a number of different contractors out there, and their paths might look a little bit different. Their labels might be a little different instead of the titles. But like I said, there are some specific roles that one has to, some of the leadership roles that one has to be a civil servant to be. Karen, do you want to add to that at all?
Well, just to say that, from a pure definition standpoint, right? I mean, APL and JPL staff wear contractor badges, right?
Okay.
So in that regard, it is inclusive of both contractors and civil servants, regardless of what badge that they're wearing in behest of NASA's science. I think the nuanced answer that Lori gave you is really about how much, to what degree does this involve also contractors who are in more support service roles at a variety of the centers, and that might be the, the Wileys of the, and those Jacobs, those kinds of things. And I would say, I think she hit the answer correct in that, some of that work is going to be representative, but as you get into some of the paths around supervision, organizational leadership, then it becomes less representative of roles that can be done by support contracts.
Okay, thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Karen and Lauren. To finish off the contractor side of things, there is one more question saying, since so many positions are at NASA centers are performed by contractors, it would be really helpful and important to have somehow capture the contractor list for each NASA center and what contracts are currently in place for each competency. So the types of science positions offered by those contractors are also listed on the tool.
I'm going to punt that one to Karen.
Well, we can take a suggestion to look into what the
Yeah.
capabilities are. Your contracting environment is also one that's a bit dynamic, much like the conversation around the USA jobs and the dynamics associated with that. So, but we can certainly look into how can the tool better represent the contract workforce at centers. Maybe it's something that falls under the center descriptions, as an example, is some description of what each center's contracting environment looks like and the roles that they play.
Okay. Thanks, Karen.
Perfect. Thank you. Then next question would be, is there a map where all of the possible NASA locations are without clicking one by one?
You chuckle, Nancy. Does that mean you want to answer that?
Yeah, one of the enhancements that we thought that would be really nice would be to have a map and show you where all the NASA centers are, and then allow you to click on, each like a star or some kind of emblem on the map, and then bring up that information about that center. So that is on our enhancements list.
Perfect. Thank you, Nancy. Next, are there avenues through which non-US citizens can get a position at NASA?
I'm going to ask Karen because I don't know the right answer. I think there might be something, but it's complicated. So, Karen, do you happen to know that answer?
So foreign nationals, given certain, meeting certain criteria, certainly do exist within the NASA workforce. Each one of them, each of those cases, however, are going to be pretty specific to the individual positions and requirements. So I think it's a little tough to answer that question in a broad fashion.
Alrighty, thank you. Is there an ability to search all open early or mid or senior positions based on location?
Not at the moment. That's a good, it's an interesting, good suggestion. Right now, the search function just goes by that title, regardless of whether it's an early, mid, or senior level position, and regardless of where it's located. So that's an interesting enhancement suggestion. And I'm going to take note of that. But right now, it's just title, regardless of where it sits.
Perfect. And then as a confirmation, is it safe to assume all positions across the tracks are for US citizens only?
Generally, yes. As Karen pointed out, there might be some nuances of how to get a very specific foreign national that has some specialty. But for the most part, I would say that they are for US citizens.
Alrighty. Back to searching by specific areas. Is there some way to search by discipline? For example, physics, biology, engineering, etc.?
No, one of the things that, it's a very good question as well. One of the things that we did when we were designing this, and this came down to the science team deciding that to make this, I believe the term was discipline agnostic, or maybe atheist, I don't know, agnostic, I guess is more appropriate, but that you could be a data scientist or a research scientist or involved in technology development, whatever, regardless of what your discipline was. It didn't matter if it was aerospace or biology, we wanted to capture that role. So we don't have science discipline in here.
Alrighty, thank you. Scrolling through, this is semi-related to contractors, but it's another suggestion for center lab science size to include the contractor counts that are aligned. And because the size of the centers would be drastically different if that was included. It would also be beneficial to share annually updated direct funding or subsidy received by each center lab towards science portfolios.
Okay, I'm jotting that down. Thank you.
Another request for including paths for biology disciplines, especially at ARC, KSC, and JSC, as well as JPL.
Yeah, if you do, so to that point, although the positions aren't specific to a discipline, if you do look at the organization descriptions, they will tell you. So Kennedy, for instance, it's going to tell you exactly. You know, this is going to be some biology type work, I believe, here, plant research. So they're going to give you a little bit of description about what the type of work it is that the organization does. If you look at Goddard, it's going to talk to you about earth science and talk about astrophysics, heliophysics, the solar system, that sort of thing. So you can glean it from that, but again, it's not on the individual positions.
Perfect. Thank you, Lauren. So there is a question in the chat for students majoring in a specific discipline, and this is a suggestion as much as a question. It would be really helpful, really useful to know which centers they should be aiming for if they're majoring in specific discipline, or whether their track goes all the way through program management, etc., or even just to know how many jobs may exist within that discipline.
Okay, I mean, so one of the ways to getting to the point of how many jobs, so like if you look at the research track, you don't see that there's X number, but you can see that the types of positions in the research track is very broad, there are a lot of positions, whereas mission, still a decent number of positions, but in particular technology development is going to be fewer. So I don't know if that helps hit that mark. But I am taking down notes here in terms of some of the enhancements that we might look to do.
Perfect. Thank you, Laura. So now there is a ask for a mechanism to provide feedback and/or additional suggestions to the tool.
Mhm.
Nancy, is that something that's doable?
I think, if Lori, if you scroll down to the footer, I mean, they could always submit comments to Tomas. He's on there in the footer. I guess you can't see it in the full
I can't,
screen.
on full screen, I can't see it.
Okay. Okay.
full
But yeah, he's in the footer as the NASA official. Yeah, down
Yes.
there on the bottom right.
I
Yeah.
don't know how to get my face off of here, but,
Okay.
oh, I don't know where I went.
Uh-oh.
It's very, very sensitive. I'm not sure why, but yeah. So to your point, down at the bottom here
Mhm.
are, you can click on the names down here. Tomas Reyna is really the one to,
Because he's the NASA official, yeah.
Yeah.
The owner.
okay. And again, as Karen pointed out, the owner of this falls under Thomas Reyna, but he's the chief of the admin branch of the Science Mission Directorate. And so they will decide what enhancements to add and to what priority.
Alrighty. We're coming to the end of the questions in the tool, but there's a question about remote career paths versus on-site. Is that distinguished within this tool?
Mm.
No, not at all.
Already? Additionally, is there career paths outside of these STEM categories? For example, human resources, accounting, or marketing?
Currently, there are no career path tools that have, I guess, some of the mission support roles, which would be like your business roles, your human resource roles. The only organization at the moment that has other career path tools would be Goddard Space Flight Center has three career path tools, one for engineering, one for safety and mission assurance, and one for flight projects. Nancy probably can tell you what the URL is for those, but there are efforts underway for other centers to possibly have a career path tool, but at the moment, the four that exist are the three at Goddard that are specific to an organization, and this is the only one that's overarching for all of NASA, in one particular field. So this is the only one that's as that broad. The other three are very specific to an organization. And Nancy, I don't know if you can drop that in the chat to put the
Yeah, I'm
URLs.
gonna try that. Let's
Okay.
see if I can do that.
Alrighty, and switching over to finalizing some of the things that I can see in the chat as we are finished most of all of the questions within the IO tool. There is a question about seeing PI under technology roles, as technology PIs do exist, but they do not find them within the tool itself.
Okay. Yeah, we did talk about that, and we ended up going with a different name rather than a PI in technology, but we can revisit that or see if, yeah, we have a co-investigator, and I think it might be, well, rather than trying to look for it here, but I think we did talk about that, and we can revisit that. There was also a recommendation to add data scientist under the technology development track as well. So I think we have a handful of positions that we are considering adding to the tool. That's why I keep saying at the moment there's 78, but there could be more in the future. But thank you for that feedback.
And then there is more of an additional request to have the career path be searchable in terms of the science disciplines, for example, planetary sciences or biology, so that students who are interested in a specific discipline can figure out that there are NASA jobs for that type of science.
Okay. Got that noted. Thank you.
And that, I believe, is coming to the very end of the questions. There is one question I don't believe can be answered here, but has popped up a couple times. In terms of the remote positions, are remote positions offered regardless of outside of the tool, but are they offered or science paths only on site?
So I think that might be a question for Karen. I think, at one point in time.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in. I'll
on
jump
that.
in here. I mean,
Thanks.
the issue about whether or not any particular job can be done either, is required to be done in a lab or remote really is resident between the supervisor and the individual executing the job, right? So it's going to be based on what is the person doing, on a day-to-day basis and the responsibilities and where is that location best established. So it's not as if NASA has as a whole said, career path A or career path B type of work are ideal for remote. Right now, it is really all situationally decided based on the work of the individual and their ability to achieve mission success in the as determined by a supervisor. So I think it would be a tough thing for us to be able to try and do that in a tool since there isn't really a commonality of practice or set of definitions that exists around that particular question when it comes to NASA as a whole.
Perfect. Thank you, Karen. And then the final question that I'm seeing, is there a way or a suggested path to transition from academia teaching into a career within NASA?
So in terms of showing you the types of positions that that are possible coming into NASA, this does a good job showing you those types of positions. And in particular, and I'll just show you the research scientist because I believe that you'll see it. You'll see here that some of the entry roles leading into a research scientist would include a university scientist, for example. So this certainly shows you some of the points where you might come in terms of the mechanism of how to get into the NASA civil servant workforce in particular. USA Jobs is the only mechanism that we use. Well, not the only, the main mechanism for applying for positions. Now, those positions might be full-time positions that are, you see here. There's also possibilities, and this is more of a human capital type question. There's a Pathways internship program. There's a NASA postdoc program, but does not necessarily have a path to civil servant roles. But there's a number of different ways in, but I'm going to say the majority of those paths in are applying for a full-time position through USA Jobs. And Karen, did you want to enhance my answer in any way?
Well, the only thing I would say is that, I mean, I think that there's ability to transition from academia into civil service roles at every single level along the career path. Okay. You do not have to search far into Thomas Zurbuchen's bio to realize that he came to NASA from academia, where he was at the time, I think a chair of an entrepreneurial and science organization and teaching. So there is nothing that would say that you would move from academia into our career paths as civil servants at any one particular time or another, ideally.
And just as an example, so associate administrator, which is Thomas Zurbuchen, roles that could have led here, we put academia, and then where might you go afterwards? You could say academia. So
Right.
we've captured
Right.
that.
I mean, I think in terms of, NASA's desire to make sure that we're maintaining scientific expertise, right? Relevant scientific expertise. Ideally, you do want folks being able to come and go from both industry and academia, et cetera, at all points across that career horizon. So I don't think that there's any real true ideal.
Perfect. Thank you. So there's a comment that just popped up about there is a Power Apps application available to help folks identify mentors to help them navigate the science civil servant world. Some centers have started an initiative to identify and connect people with mentors and mentees. It would be helpful to integrate this app within the Career Path Navigator so that a user could click a link to find all available mentors under a specific track and/or discipline.
So I'm jotting that down. Andrew, maybe afterwards, or if you can tell me who made that recommendation, we might be able to get in touch with that person to see, because I don't know that information. So we can kind of explore that if we know.
And is there a URL that we can go to see it, or?
There is a URL that is available. I will copy that and send it to y'all offline.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda, for that suggestion. One more question, and then I believe that'll be all the time we have. Does this career path tool link to the matched NASA job opening? Oh, we've already answered that. The answer is unfortunately no.
At the moment, no, but it might in the future.
So with that, there are a number of different comments and people in both the IO and the chat saying this is a fantastic new tool and that they are very happy that it exists because it serves a function that has not been served by other tools. So thank you.
I like that feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with that, that does bring us to the end of our town hall today. There have been a number of people who have requested that we will email them the recording. We will have it posted online at science.nasa.gov/about-us/science workforce initiatives, but we will also email that to you to make it easier to find this recording. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.